The massive hologram flickered to life in the center of the Galactic Council chamber. Ambassador Kextar of the Zalithian Empire stood tall, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of authority. His blue-scaled face showed clear disgust as he looked at the human representative sitting in the small chair reserved for minor species. "The time has come to address the human problem," Kextar announced. His voice echoed through the enormous chamber, where representatives from 47 different alien species sat in judgment. "These creatures have spread through space like a disease. They ignore our established trade routes. They refuse to follow proper galactic protocols. They act like they own the universe." The human ambassador, a middle-aged woman named Maria Santos, sat quietly. She had expected this day would come. For 30 years, humanity had been expanding into space at a rate that made older civilizations nervous. What they didn't know was that humans had very good reasons for their careful expansion patterns. Vorthan Trade Minister Kel Noth stepped forward. The Vorthons looked like giant gray spiders, but they controlled most of the galaxy's banking systems. "The numbers speak clearly," Kel Noth clicked in his mechanical voice. "Human trade volume has increased by 400% in just 20 years. They are building military stations in 7-star systems. They mine resources at rates that will exhaust entire worlds within decades." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The crystalline hegemony's representative chimed like breaking glass. "They take without asking. They build without permission. They act like they are equals to civilizations that have existed for millions of years." Kextar raised one of his hands for silence. "Therefore, the Galactic Council has decided to impose comprehensive sanctions on the human species. These sanctions will remain in effect until they learn proper respect for galactic order." Maria finally spoke. "What sanctions?" "Complete trade embargo on all advanced technologies," Kextar read from a crystal tablet. "Humans will no longer have access to quantum processors, graviton manipulators, or exotic matter. All hyperspace lanes are closed to human vessels. Any human ship attempting to use established space routes will be destroyed." The list continued. "All human assets in galactic banking systems are frozen immediately. No alien species may provide technical assistance to humans. No human may enter council space without specific permission, which will not be granted." Maria felt her stomach drop. The aliens had no idea what they had just done. "Ambassador Kextar, I must warn you that these sanctions could have consequences you don't expect." Kextar's 4 eyes glowed with amusement. "Threats, human? You are in no position to make threats. Your species controls 12 star systems. The Council controls 12,000. You have been playing at being a galactic power, but now you will learn the truth." "This isn't a threat," Maria said quietly. "It's a warning. There are things about our activities that you don't understand." The chamber filled with alien laughter. The Hive Queen of the Sectoid Collective clicked her mandibles in what passed for humor among her species. "The humans think they have secrets that matter. How adorable." Maria tried one more time. "Our operations in the Sol system, particularly around Jupiter, are not what you think they are. We're not just mining gas, we're— Enough!" Kextar slammed one of his fists on the podium. "No more human lies. No more excuses. The sanctions begin immediately. You have 72 hours to remove all human vessels from Council space. After that, they will be fired upon without warning." The session ended with a unanimous vote. Every alien species agreed to the sanctions except for 3 minor civilizations that abstained. As the chamber emptied, Maria activated her secure communicator. "Dr. Chen, are you receiving this?" The voice that answered came from a heavily encrypted channel originating near Jupiter. "I heard everything, Maria. They have no idea what they've just done." Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Ganymede Station, staring at the displays showing Jupiter's roiling surface. Around her, dozens of technicians monitored readings that would have terrified any alien scientist if they had understood what they meant. "How bad is this going to be?" Maria asked through the communicator. Sarah looked at the main display. Deep beneath Jupiter's gas layers, something that had slept for millions of years was stirring. The energy readings had been climbing slowly for decades, but now they showed a concerning spike. "The isotopes we need for the containment field generators come from Vorthan suppliers," Sarah said. "The quantum processors that run our monitoring systems are built by the crystalline hegemony. Without those supplies—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Maria understood. How long do we have? Sarah's chief engineer, a man named David Park, looked up from his console. At current degradation rates, maybe 6 months before we start seeing serious containment failures. Less if the core temperature keeps rising like this. Maria closed her eyes. The aliens thought they were punishing humanity for being too aggressive. They had no idea that humans had been protecting the entire galaxy for 50 years. It had started with a deep space probe in 2157. The probe had been sent to study Jupiter's core composition, but instead it had found something impossible. Buried deep in the planet's center was a structure that didn't belong there. It was clearly artificial, clearly ancient, and clearly dangerous. The world's governments had panicked when they saw the first readings. The thing in Jupiter's core was some kind of weapon left behind by a civilization that had died out long before humans even existed. If it ever activated, it would turn Jupiter into a star. Not a normal, stable star, but a violent explosion that would sterilize every planet within 20 light years. That included Earth. It also included the homeworlds of 16 different alien species that now thought they were teaching humans a lesson. Instead of trying to study the weapon or use it, humanity had made a choice that the aliens would never have expected. They decided to protect the galaxy from it. Every major nation on Earth had contributed resources to build a network of containment systems around Jupiter. They had spent trillions of dollars and 50 years of research to keep the weapon asleep. The gas mining operations that aliens mocked were actually the most sophisticated containment system ever built. Hundreds of stations throughout the Jupiter system worked constantly to monitor and suppress the weapon's energy output. It was the most important job in human history, and they had done it in complete secrecy. Now the aliens had cut off their supply lines. "Sir," one of the technicians called out, "the containment field in Sector 7 just dropped to 67% efficiency. That's the lowest it's ever been." Sarah felt the weight of the galaxy's fate on her shoulders. Around Jupiter, invisible force fields held back enough energy to crack planets. Those fields were powered by technology that humans had barely learned to understand, maintained by supplies they could no longer buy. "Start implementing emergency protocols," she ordered. "Contact every mining operation in the outer system. We need to find alternative sources for everything we can't get from alien traders." David looked up from his calculations. "Even if we cannibalize every piece of equipment in the solar system, we can maybe extend the timeline by a few weeks. We need those Vorthan isotopes. There's no substitute." Through the station's massive viewports, Jupiter hung like a striped balloon, beautiful and peaceful. None of the aliens celebrating their sanctions could see the invisible web of human technology that surrounded the planet like a cage. They had no idea that their punishment might kill them all. Sarah made a decision that she hoped she wouldn't. Regret. "Open a channel to the Galactic Council. It's time to tell them the truth." "They won't believe us." Maria's voice crackled through the communicator. "Then we'll show them," Sarah said, watching as another containment field flickered and dimmed. "Before it's too late." In the depths of Jupiter, something that had waited millions of years began to wake up. Dr. Sarah Chen walked through the memorial hall on Ganymede Station, her footsteps echoing in the quiet space. The walls were covered with photos and names of the thousands of people who had died keeping Jupiter's secret. Scientists who had spent their lives studying something they could never publish papers about. Engineers who had built wonders that the galaxy would never see. Soldiers who had given everything to protect people who didn't even know they existed. The memorial ended at a massive window that showed Jupiter filling half the sky. Sarah pressed her hand against the reinforced glass and remembered the day it all began. She had been 25 then, fresh out of graduate school, when the first probe had sent back its impossible readings. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, her mentor, had called her into the lab at 3 a.m. "Sarah, look at this," Elizabeth had said, her voice shaking. "Tell me what you see." The probe's data had shown Jupiter's core in perfect detail. At the very center, where there should have been compressed hydrogen and helium, was something else. It was a structure the size of a small moon, made of materials that didn't exist in nature. Geometric patterns covered its surface in mathematical sequences that hurt to look at. "What is it?" Sarah had whispered. "We don't know," Elizabeth had replied. "But it's been sending out energy pulses every 4.7 seconds for the last 6 hours. And those pulses are getting stronger. That had been 53 years ago. Elizabeth was gone now, her name carved into the memorial wall, but her work lived on. The thing they had discovered was called the Sleeper by the humans who studied it. No one knew who had built it or why. They only knew what it could do. Sarah walked to her office where the walls were covered with classified research from 5 decades of study. The Sleeper was not just a weapon. It was a stellar engineering device, capable of manipulating the fundamental forces that held stars together. In the right hands, it could turn gas giants into suns or collapse them into black holes. It could even create stable wormholes through space, but it was not in the right hands. It wasn't in any hands at all. The Sleeper operated on its own, following programming left behind by its creators, and that programming was slowly activating after millions of years of dormancy. The first activation attempt had nearly destroyed the Jupiter system. The energy release had been so powerful that it had created a gravity wave detectable from Earth. That was when humanity had realized they were not dealing with a simple artifact. This was a doomsday weapon that could crack planets. The second activation had been worse. Jupiter's entire magnetic field had reversed, causing radiation storms that killed 3 research teams before they could evacuate. The Sleeper had begun converting Jupiter's core material into exotic matter, starting a chain reaction that could have turned the planet into a miniature quasar. That was when the world's governments had made their decision. Instead of trying to control or study the weapon, they would contain it. Every major nation on Earth had contributed to the Jupiter Defense Initiative. They had built a network of gravitational dampeners, energy siphons, and quantum stabilizers throughout the Jupiter system. The gas mining operations that aliens saw were actually the most sophisticated containment system ever created. Dr. Park found Sarah in her office, staring at the readings from the latest probe mission. "The core temperature is up another 2 degrees, he said, "and the energy pulse frequency is increasing. We're at 4.6 seconds now." Sarah nodded grimly. The Sleeper's pulses had been slowing down for 50 years as the human containment system suppressed its activity. Now they were speeding up again. "How are the containment fields holding?" "Sector 12 is down to 45% efficiency. We lost another graviton manipulator in Sector 18. And the quantum processors in the orbital platforms are showing stress, fractures. All of those components came from alien suppliers. The graviton manipulators were built by the Vorthons. The quantum processors came from the crystalline hegemony. The exotic matter for the energy siphons was mined by the sectoid collective. Without those supplies, the containment system was slowly failing." "What about substitutes?" Sarah asked. David shook his head. "We've tried everything. Human technology just isn't advanced enough. We can build crude replacements for some components, but they fail within days under the stress. The energy levels we're dealing with require materials and techniques that took the aliens millions of years to develop." Sarah looked at her computer screen, which showed a real-time map of the containment grid. Red warning indicators were spreading across the display like a disease. Each red dot represented a failing containment node. When enough of them failed, the Sleeper would wake up completely. "Show me the worst-case scenario," she said. David activated the holographic projector in the center of the office. A 3-dimensional model of the local stellar neighborhood appeared in the air. Jupiter sat at the center, surrounded by the other planets of the Sol system. "If the Sleeper fully activates, it will convert Jupiter's entire mass into energy in approximately 0.3 seconds, David explained. "The initial explosion will be roughly equivalent to a supernova. The radiation pulse will sterilize every planet within 15 light years. The hologram changed, showing expanding spheres of deadly radiation spreading out from Sol. Earth died in the first wave. Mars was vaporized. The radiation continued expanding, reaching Alpha Centauri in 4 years. But that's not the worst part," David continued. "The explosion will destabilize the quantum foam in local space. Reality itself will become unstable. Stars will collapse into black holes. Planets will phase in and out of existence. The damage will spread through hyperspace, affecting star systems hundreds of light years away." Sarah studied the display. The radiation sphere would engulf the home systems of 23 different alien species, including the Zalithians and Vortans, who had pushed hardest for sanctions against humanity. "They have no idea," she whispered. "They think they're punishing us for being aggressive. They don't know we've been protecting them for 50 years. A new voice spoke from the doorway. "They're about to find out." Sarah turned to see Maria Santos entering the office. The human ambassador looked exhausted after her long flight from the Galactic Council chambers. "I've been authorized by every government on Earth to reveal the truth about Jupiter," Maria said. "We're going to send the aliens a complete data package. Everything we know about the sleeper, all of our research, proof of what will happen if the containment system fails." David looked skeptical. "Will they believe us?" "They have to," Sarah said. "Show them the energy readings, show them the gravitational anomalies, show them 50 years of sensor data that proves something massive is hidden in Jupiter's core." Maria activated her portable communicator. "I've already started the transmission. The data is being sent to every member of the Galactic Council through diplomatic channels. They'll have complete information about the sleeper within 6 hours." Sarah felt a moment of hope. If the aliens understood what was really happening, they would lift the sanctions immediately. They would provide all the supplies and assistance humanity needed to keep the sleeper contained. They might even work together to find a permanent solution. But that hope faded when she looked at the containment system status display. Another graviton manipulator had just failed. The quantum processors in Sector 7 were operating at 23% efficiency. The exotic matter reserves were running dangerously low. "How long do we have?" Maria asked. Sarah ran the calculations in her head. "If they lift the sanctions tomorrow and send emergency supplies immediately, we might be able to stabilize the system. But if they delay, or if they don't believe us—" She didn't finish the sentence. Through the office window, Jupiter rotated slowly against the star field. Deep in its core, the sleeper pulsed with energy that could crack reality itself. The aliens who had imposed sanctions to teach humanity a lesson were about to learn that some lessons were too dangerous to teach. "There's something else," David said quietly. "The probe data from yesterday shows structural changes in the sleeper itself. It's not just waking up, it's adapting, learning. The weapon is studying our containment system and finding ways around it." Sarah stared at the data on her screen. The sleeper was not just a doomsday weapon, it was an intelligent doomsday weapon. And it had been watching them for 50 years, learning how they thought, how they worked, how they tried to stop it. "God, help us all," she whispered. Outside the window, Jupiter's great red spot had begun to change color. The emergency klaxon wailed through Ganymede Station as Dr. Sarah Chen ran down the corridor toward the command center. She had been asleep for only 3 hours when the alarm started. Around her, technicians rushed between stations, their faces grim with worry. "Report," Sarah called out as she entered the main control room. Dr. Park looked up from his console, sweat beading on his forehead despite the station's cool air. "We lost containment grid 7 completely at SO3 for 7 hours. The backup systems kicked in, but they're already showing stress fractures. The exotic matter in the energy siphons is degrading faster than we can replace it." Sarah looked at the main display screen, which showed a 3-dimensional map of the Jupiter containment system. What had once been a perfect web of green indicators now looked like a patchwork quilt. Red failure warnings dotted the display everywhere she looked. "How bad is it?" "Overall containment efficiency is down to 31%, David said. "At this rate, we'll hit critical failure in 6 days." Through the massive observation windows, Jupiter hung in space like a sick patient. The great red spot, which had been stable for hundreds of years, was now pulsing with strange colors. Purple and gold bands of light rippled across the planet's surface in patterns that followed no natural law. "Sir, we're getting reports from the outer system monitoring stations," a technician called out. "They're detecting massive gravitational waves coming from Jupiter's core. The waves are so powerful they're affecting the orbits of the moons." Sarah felt her stomach drop. Gravitational waves meant that the sleeper was manipulating space-time itself. The weapon wasn't just waking up, it was starting to flex its power. "Any word from the Galactic Council?" she asked. Maria Santos's voice crackled over the communication system from her ship, which was traveling back to Council space. "I transmitted our complete data package 18 hours ago. Every piece of evidence we have about the sleeper, 50 years of research, proof of what's going to happen if they don't lift the sanctions." And? Nothing. Complete silence. Not even an acknowledgement that they received the data. Sarah wasn't surprised. The alien species that made up the Galactic Council had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. The idea that a young species like humanity could possess knowledge, they didn't have was probably impossible for them to accept. "Dr. Chen," another technician called out, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth." The main screen shifted to show the face of Director James Morrison, head of the Jupiter Defense Initiative on Earth. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Sarah, we've got a problem. The supply ship from the asteroid belt was intercepted by a Zalithian patrol 6 hours ago." Sarah felt her blood turn cold. The supply ship was carrying the last of their reserve exotic matter, enough to keep the energy siphons running for another month. Without it, the containment system would collapse in days instead of weeks. "Where are our people now?" she asked. "In custody on the Zalithian battlecruiser Righteous Vengeance," Morrison replied. "They're being interrogated under the assumption that they're carrying weapons components. The Zalithians think we're building some kind of superweapon and using the Jupiter story as a cover." David slammed his fist on the console. "Don't they understand? We're trying to save their lives." "They don't believe us," Morrison said. Ambassador Kexatar released a statement saying that human claims about ancient weapons are desperate propaganda designed to frighten the Council into lifting justified sanctions. Sarah stared at the readings from Jupiter's core. The energy output had increased by 12% in the last hour. The sleeper was stirring more actively, responding to the weakening containment fields by pushing harder against them. "What about substitutes? Can we build replacement components?" Dr. Park pulled up a technical schematic on his screen. "We're trying, but human technology is thousands of years behind what we need. We can build crude graviton manipulators, but they burn out in hours under the stress. The quantum processors we manufacture can't handle the computing load, and we have no way to produce exotic matter in the quantities we need." The communication system crackled to life again. This time it was Captain Lisa Rodriguez, commander of the Deep Space Monitoring Station near Pluto. "Command, we're detecting something new. Long-range sensors are picking up a massive fleet heading toward the Sol system. 67 ships, all Council species. ETA is 36 hours. Sarah's blood ran cold. "Are they coming to help?" "Negative. They're broadcasting on standard military frequencies. It's an enforcement fleet. They think we're building weapons, and they're coming to stop us." The irony was almost too painful to bear. The aliens were so convinced that humanity was planning to attack them that they were rushing to prevent it. They had no idea that their interference would trigger a catastrophe that would kill them all. Dr. Chen, one of the monitoring technicians, called out urgently, "The energy pulse frequency from Jupiter's core just changed. We're at 4.2 seconds now, and it's accelerating." Sarah looked at the sensor readings. For 50 years, the sleeper's energy pulses had been slowing down as the human containment system suppressed its activity. Now they were speeding up rapidly. Each pulse was stronger than the last. "It knows," she whispered. "What?" David asked. "The sleeper knows what's happening. It's an intelligent system. It can sense that our containment fields are failing, and it's taking advantage of the weakness." On the main screen, Jupiter's surface roiled with unnatural storms. Lightning bolts the size of continents crackled between the planet's cloud layers. The magnetic field readings were fluctuating wildly as the sleeper's energy discharges interfered with natural processes. "Sir, we're getting reports from the civilian population," another technician announced. "Jupiter's radiation output has increased enough that people on Ganymede are starting to notice. The aurora displays are visible in broad daylight now." Sarah closed her eyes. Soon it wouldn't matter if the civilians knew about the sleeper or not. When the containment system finally failed, everyone within 20 light years would know. They would have about 15 minutes to send final messages to their families before the radiation wave arrived. "Open a channel to the incoming council." "Fleet," she ordered. "Dr. Chen, that's not a good idea," David warned. "If they think we're building weapons, any communication from us might be seen as a threat." "They need to know the truth, all of it." The communication system activated, broadcasting on all frequencies that the approaching fleet would be monitoring. Sarah took a deep breath and began speaking. "Attention Galactic Council Enforcement Fleet. This is Dr. Sarah Chen, Director of the Jupiter Defense Initiative. You are approaching a containment zone for an ancient alien weapon of unprecedented power. This weapon is currently showing signs of activation due to failure of our containment systems, which has been caused by the trade sanctions imposed by the Council." She paused, letting that sink in. "If you continue your approach to Sol system, you will arrive just in time to be vaporized by the largest explosion in galactic history. I am transmitting all of our data about the weapon to your fleet immediately. Please study this information carefully before you do something that will kill billions of your own people." The transmission ended. Sarah stared at the display showing Jupiter's increasingly violent surface. In 36 hours, the Council fleet would arrive to find out whether humanity had been telling the truth or not. She suspected they would learn the answer in the most catastrophic way possible. "Dr. Chen," the monitoring technician called out. Again. "Jupiter's core temperature just spiked by 50 degrees. The gravitational waves are getting stronger and—" He paused, checking his readings twice. "The Great Red Spot is changing shape. It's becoming more geometric, like it's being controlled by something artificial." Through the observation windows, Jupiter's famous storm was indeed transforming. What had been a chaotic swirl of gases was becoming a perfect spiral, then a hexagon, then patterns that seemed to shift between dimensions. The sleeper was no longer hiding. After 50 years of concealment, it was announcing its presence to the galaxy, and it was running out of patience. Ambassador Kextar stood in the command center of the Zalithian flagship Eternal Glory, watching the holographic display of the Sol system with 4 arms crossed in disgust. Around him, his officers analyzed the data that the humans had transmitted, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright disbelief. "Admiral," his science officer reported, "the human claims are becoming more elaborate by the hour. They now insist that Jupiter contains a weapon built by an extinct alien civilization. They have provided extensive fabricated sensor data to support this fantasy." Kextar's scales rippled with amusement. "Of course they have. Desperate species often create elaborate lies when faced with superior force. What does our intelligence analysis say about their actual capabilities?" The intelligence officer activated another hologram. "The humans have been remarkably secretive about their operations around Jupiter. Our long-range sensors detect massive industrial activity, but their explanation of gas mining never made sense. The energy readings are far too high for simple resource extraction." "Exactly," Kextar said. "They are building weapons, probably some kind of planet-killer device. They hope to frighten us with stories of ancient artifacts, so we will retreat before discovering their real project." On the other side of the galaxy, Trade Minister Kelnoth scuttled across the crystalline floor of the Vorthon Central Bank, his spider-like legs clicking nervously. The human data package had triggered automatic analysis protocols throughout the Vorthon computer networks, and the results were troubling. "Minister," his chief analyst buzzed through translated mechanical speech, "the mathematical models in the human data are sophisticated. Their energy calculations follow principles that we have only recently discovered ourselves." Kelnoth's multiple eyes focused on the display. "You think their fabrication is convincing?" "That's just it, sir. Some of this data would be impossible to fabricate. The gravitational wave patterns they claim to have recorded follow mathematical laws that humans shouldn't know about. Their understanding of exotic matter interactions is centuries ahead of where their published research suggests they should be." The trade minister paused. The Vorthons had built their galactic empire on careful analysis of risk and reward. If there was even a small chance that the humans were telling the truth, what would be the economic impact if their claims are accurate? He asked. His analyst's mechanical voice carried undertones of fear. "Total. The destruction of 23 major trade worlds, including our primary manufacturing centers. The collapse of interstellar commerce throughout this entire galactic sector. Economic damage in the quadrillions of credits." Meanwhile, in the heart of Council space, the crystalline hegemony's collective consciousness was having its first serious debate in 10,000 years. The crystal beings communicated through harmonic resonance, and their conversations sounded like a symphony of breaking glass. "The humans present data that resonates with forbidden frequencies," one crystal entity chimed. "Their energy readings match theoretical models from the ancient archives." "Impossible," another responded with sharp, discordant notes. "No young species could possess such knowledge. The archives speak of weapons built by the predecessors, but they are myths, stories told to frighten children." "But what if they are not myths?" A third voice joined, its tone deep and ominous. "What if the predecessors were real, and what if they left weapons behind?" The debate raged through the crystalline network. Some entities demanded immediate action to verify the human claims. Others insisted that showing any credibility to human lies would encourage other young species to make similar claims. Back in the Sol system, Dr. Sarah Chen watched the Council fleet approach, while Jupiter continued its increasingly violent display. The planet's surface now showed geometric patterns that were clearly artificial. The Great Red Spot had become a perfect spiral that rotated in ways that defied atmospheric physics. "Any response from the aliens?" she asked Maria Santos, who was monitoring diplomatic channels from her ship. "Nothing official," Maria replied. "But we're picking up increased communications traffic between the different species. They're talking to each other about our data, even if they won't talk to us." "That's something, at least," Sarah said. But her optimism faded as she looked at the containment system status. Overall efficiency was down to 18%. The quantum processors in 3 more sectors had burned out during the night. The exotic matter reserves would be exhausted in 36 hours. "Dr. Chen," David called out urgently, "you need to see this. We just lost contact with monitoring station Europa 7. Sarah felt her blood run cold. Europa 7 was one of their most important facilities, responsible for monitoring the energy output from Jupiter's northern hemisphere. Equipment failure? Negative. The last transmission shows that the station was vaporized. A focused energy beam from Jupiter's core punched straight through Europa's ice shell and destroyed the facility in 0.3 seconds. The main display shifted to show the remains of Europa 7. Where there had once been a sophisticated monitoring station, there was now a perfectly circular hole 3 kilometers wide, melted through 2 kilometers of ice. The edges of the hole still glowed with residual heat. "The sleeper is actively targeting our monitoring stations," David continued. "It's not just waking up randomly. It's systematically removing our ability to track its activity." Sarah stared at the readings in horror. The weapon wasn't just intelligent, it was strategic. It had spent 50 years studying the human containment system, learning how it worked, identifying its weak points. Now it was methodically destroying the infrastructure that kept it contained. "How many stations are in immediate danger?" she asked. "All of them. The energy beam can reach anywhere in the Jupiter system. If the sleeper decides to eliminate our monitoring network completely, it can do so in a matter of hours." On the communication system, Ambassador Kexitar's voice suddenly crackled to life. The Zalithian had decided to respond to the human warnings, but not in the way Sarah had hoped. "Human facility," Kexitar announced in his most authoritative tone. "You will cease all activities immediately and prepare to be boarded. Your fabricated warnings and false data transmissions are acts of aggression against the Galactic Council. You have 30 minutes to surrender yourselves for questioning." Sarah keyed the transmitter. "Ambassador Kexitar, I'm begging you to look at the energy readings your own sensors must be detecting. Jupiter is showing massive gravitational anomalies. The magnetic field fluctuations alone should tell you that something unprecedented is happening." "Your special effects are impressive," Kexitar replied coldly, "but the Council is not easily fooled. You will surrender now, or we will disable your facility and take you by force." David looked up from his console with naked fear in his eyes. "Dr. Chen, the sleeper's energy pulse frequency just hit 3.8 seconds. The rate of acceleration is increasing exponentially. And..." He paused, checking his readings again. "Jupiter's mass is starting to convert to energy at the quantum level. The process has begun." Sarah closed her eyes. The sleeper was no longer just threatening to wake up. It was waking up. The containment system that humanity had spent 50 years building was failing, and the weapon was beginning its activation sequence. Through the observation windows, Jupiter's appearance had become completely unnatural. Bands of exotic energy circled the planet like glowing rings. The atmospheric storms had organized themselves into geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with their own light. Most terrifying of all, the planet appeared to be getting brighter, as if lit from within by a growing internal fire. "Open a channel to the entire Council fleet," Sarah ordered. "All ships, all frequencies." "Dr. Chen, they won't listen," Maria warned. "They will when they see what's about to happen." Sarah activated the transmitter and spoke with quiet urgency. "All Council vessels, this is your final warning. Jupiter's core temperature has reached critical levels. Mass energy conversion has begun. You have approximately 6 hours before total containment failure. If you do not withdraw immediately and provide emergency assistance to our containment efforts, every ship in your fleet will be destroyed, along with all life in this star system and 22 others. She paused, then added, "Look at your own sensor readings. Look at Jupiter. Tell me that what you're seeing is normal atmospheric activity. Tell me that a gas giant naturally produces gravitational waves strong enough to affect moon orbits. Tell me that this is all an elaborate human deception." The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, Jupiter pulsed with another wave of impossible energy, and another human monitoring station vanished in a flash of light. The sleeper was no longer sleeping, and the galaxy had less than 6 hours to decide whether to believe the species they had spent decades dismissing as primitive and aggressive. The moment Ambassador Kextar saw Jupiter with his own eyes, his 4 arms went limp with shock. The planet that had appeared normal on long-range sensors was clearly visible through the flagship's viewports as something that should not exist. Geometric patterns of light spiraled across its surface. Energy discharges the size of continents crackled between layers of atmosphere that had organized themselves into impossible configurations. "Science officer," Kextar's voice was barely a whisper. "Are we seeing some kind of holographic projection?" The science officer's scales had turned pale gray with fear. "No, sir. Our sensors confirm that Jupiter is producing energy readings equivalent to a small star. The gravitational waves are so powerful they're affecting our ship's navigation systems from 600 million kilometers away." Behind them, the communication officer was frantically working his controls. "Sir, I'm receiving priority transmissions from the Vorthan fleet, the crystalline ships, and the sectoid vessels. They're all reporting the same readings." On the view screen, Trade Minister Kelnoth's spider-like face appeared, his multiple eyes wide with panic. "Kextar, our economic computers have finished analyzing the human data. If their projections are accurate, the energy release from Jupiter will destroy our core manufacturing worlds within 4 years. The radiation wave will reach Vorthan Prime in 6.3 years. The screen split to show the harmonic frequencies of the crystalline hegemony's collective voice. Their usually perfect tones were discordant with fear. "Our archived records speak of weapons built by the predecessors. We dismiss them as myths, but the energy signatures match theoretical models that we thought were impossible to achieve." Ambassador Kextar stared at Jupiter as another human monitoring station vanished in a flash of light. The weapon, hidden in the planet's core, was systematically destroying the very systems that had kept it contained for 50 years. "Communications. Open a direct channel to the human command center," he ordered, his voice heavy with the weight of his mistake. On Ganymede Station, Dr. Sarah Chen was coordinating the evacuation of civilian personnel when the call came through. The containment system efficiency had dropped to 11%, and the sleeper's energy pulses were now coming every 2.1 seconds. "Dr. Chen," Ambassador Kextar's image appeared on the main screen. "We believe you. What do you need?" Sarah felt a moment of relief, but it faded quickly as she looked at the system status display. "Everything. Exotic matter, quantum processors, graviton manipulators. We need enough supplies to rebuild the entire containment grid, and we need them in the next 4 hours." "You have it," Kextar said immediately. "Every ship in our fleet is being retrofitted to carry emergency supplies. The Vorthons are stripping components from their own vessels. The crystalline entities are donating processing cores that they've spent millennia growing." Dr. Park looked up from his calculations. "It won't be enough. Even with unlimited supplies, we can't rebuild the containment system fast enough. The sleeper is actively targeting our repair crews. We lost another team 20 minutes ago." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the galaxy's fate on her shoulders. "Then we go to the contingency plan." "What contingency plan?" Kextar asked. Sarah activated a new display that showed a network of installations throughout the outer solar system. Massive structures that had been disguised as solar power collectors and communication arrays were revealed to be something far more sophisticated. "For 50 years we've known that containment might eventually fail," Sarah explained. "So we built a backup system. If the sleeper can't be contained, we can channel its energy output in a controlled direction." The display showed energy conduits and focusing arrays positioned around the solar system like the petals of an enormous flower. All of them pointed toward empty interstellar space, away from any inhabited systems. "You're going to let the weapon activate?" Kelnoth's voice cracked with disbelief. "We're going to sacrifice Jupiter to save the galaxy," Sarah said. "The sleeper will convert the planet's entire mass to energy, but instead of an omnidirectional explosion that destroys everything within 20 light years, we'll focus the blast into a narrow beam aimed at empty space." Ambassador Kexatar studied the display. "What do you need from us?" "The focusing arrays were damaged during your enforcement patrols. Several key components were destroyed when your ships tried to disable what they thought were weapons platforms. We need replacement parts, and we need them installed in the next 3 hours." The next few hours became a desperate race against time. Council ships that had come to conquer humanity instead found themselves working frantically to save their own civilizations. Vorthon engineers crawled through human installations, replacing quantum processors with hands that had been designed for entirely different tasks. Crystalline entities donated pieces of their own bodies to repair focusing arrays. Zalithian construction crews worked alongside human technicians to install graviton manipulators in the void of space. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the command center, watching Jupiter's final transformation. The planet no longer looked like a gas giant. It had become a sphere of pure energy, held together only by its own gravitational field and the failing remnants of the human containment system. "Containment system efficiency is at 3%, David reported. "The sleeper's energy pulse frequency is now 0.8 seconds. Core temperature has reached 15 million degrees. Through the observation windows, Jupiter blazed like a second sun. The energy output was so intense that Ganymede's ice sheets were beginning to melt, despite being protected by magnetic shields. "Status of the focusing array?" Sarah asked. 87% complete. The Vorthans just finished installing the quantum processors in Sector 12. The crystalline entities are growing new processing cores for Sectors 15 and 16. But we're running out of time. On the communication system, reports flooded in from across the solar system. Human and alien crews working together in a desperate attempt to complete humanity's last-ditch effort to save the galaxy. "Dr. Chen," a technician called out, "the sleeper just destroyed our last monitoring station in the Jupiter system. We're flying blind now." Sarah nodded grimly. The weapon had eliminated every human sensor that could track its activity, but she didn't need sensors to know what was happening. Jupiter's light was now visible to the naked eye from Earth, 600 million kilometers away. "All stations, prepare for final activation," she announced over the system-wide communication network. "The sleeper is about to reach critical mass." Ambassador Kextar's voice came over the communicator from his flagship, which was positioned near one of the focusing arrays. "Dr. Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I want you to know that we understand now. Humanity has been protecting us for 50 years, and we responded with sanctions and threats. We will not forget this debt." Sarah smiled sadly. "Just help us finish the job, Ambassador." The final countdown began. Jupiter's mass energy conversion reached the point of no return. The sleeper's ancient programming, dormant for millions of years, finally completed its activation sequence. Jupiter exploded. For 0.3 seconds, the energy released was equivalent to a supernova. Radiation that should have sterilized 23 star systems instead found itself caught and channeled by humanity's focusing array. The beam of concentrated destruction lanced out into empty interstellar space, carrying enough energy to vaporize 100 worlds. When the light faded, Jupiter was gone. In its place was an expanding cloud of exotic particles and a small black hole that would eventually evaporate over millions of years. The 4 largest moons, including Ganymede, had been moved to safe distances by the gravitational manipulation systems. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the command center of what had once been a gas mining station and was now revealed as the most sophisticated scientific installation in galactic history. Around her, human and alien technicians cheered as their instruments confirmed that the energy beam had missed every inhabited system in its path. The galaxy was safe. Ambassador Kextar's image appeared on the communication screen. His 4 arms were raised in the Zalithian gesture of deepest respect. "Dr. Chen, the Galactic Council hereby revokes all sanctions against humanity. We also formally request that Earth accept full membership in the Council, with voting rights appropriate to a major galactic power. Sarah looked around at her exhausted team, then at the displays showing dozens of other installations throughout human space. Installations that had been disguised as routine mining operations and research stations, but were actually monitoring and containing other ancient weapons that humanity had discovered. "Ambassador," she said with a tired smile, "we accept your offer. But there's something else you should know. Jupiter wasn't the only weapon we've been guarding. Our deep space surveys have found 17 other sleeper installations in various star systems throughout the galaxy." The communication channel went silent as the implications sank in. "The question," Sarah continued, "is whether you want our help finding and containing the others before they wake up on their own." The age of human isolation was over. The age of humanity as the galaxy's protectors had just begun.